Sometimes the ghosts you thought you left in the desert find you in the quietest places. A greasy spoon, a plate of bacon, and a name from another life echoing across chipped linoleum. For Ronald Mason, breakfast would never be the same. The Sunrise Diner had a smell that settled in your clothes. Bacon fat, burnt coffee, faint lemon cleaner struggling to win the fight. Most mornings it was background noise, the kind that wrapped around old men and truckers like a favorite jacket. But today, for Ronald Ron Mason, the air was wired. The world's slowest wall clock crawled toward 9:01 a.m., a Tuesday that looked like any other. He'd picked a corner booth out of habit, back to the wall, field of vision clear, 62 years old, hair gone silver at the temples, face creased deep around the eyes. His paratrooper jacket was worn smooth at the elbows, a ghosted patch, 82nd Airborne, faded but still proud. He nursed a mug of coffee so thick it could have stopped a bullet. On the table, a tattered notepad, a VA appointment card, half a crossword. The door chimed, letting in a burst of morning sun. Ron barely looked up until he heard it, a voice, clear and clipped, echoing from the kitchen passed through. "Storm, come in! Order up! Put another round of bacon on!" Storm. He hadn't heard that call sign in 15 years. In Afghanistan, the word could mean cover, or chaos, or sometimes salvation. His hand froze around the mug. The chatter in the diner faded to a murmur. He turned slowly, eyes scanning the counter. There, at the far end, pouring coffee into a row of chipped mugs, was a waitress. Black woman, maybe early 40s, posture straight as a drill sergeant. The badge on her chest said Linda, but her stance said something else. She moved like she was on patrol, not slinging eggs. Every glance was measured, every step placed just so. Ron stood, knees aching, and walked to the counter. The buzz of voices, the scrape of forks, faded into a kind of hush. He cleared his throat. "Who called you Storm just now?" His voice was rough, unfamiliar to even himself. She didn't startle, not really. She just looked up, a practiced smile hiding a flicker of surprise. "Old nickname," she said, breezy. "Army days, doesn't mean much now." But Ron could see the tension in her hands, the way she stilled, coffee pot hovering above the mug, waiting for something. He took off his battered baseball cap, revealing a shaven head, a scar arching above his right temple, and, just visible, the tattoo. Storm held the sky. Block letters, military font, faded but defiant. The diner fell silent. Linda's eyes didn't land on the tattoo, but on the scar next to it. Ron could see her realize, instantly, deeply, because she'd been the one who gave him that field dressing. Fingers slick with blood and sand, under mortar fire outside Kandahar. The past roared in both of them like a chopper blade. "Sergeant Mason." The words came out in a shaky exhale, too quiet for anyone but him. "You made it," she said, voice almost breaking. "After all this time, you're alive." Ron gave a slow, lopsided grin, the kind only survivors can manage. "Only because of you, ma'am. They said you were gone. Some said killed. Others said you were discharged for insubordination." Linda's shoulders squared, her jaw set. She slipped off her name tag and set it on the counter. "I refused to leave my wounded," she said. "They called it insubordination. Medal showed up in the mail. Pension never did." A silence fell, thicker than any steam from the kitchen. Ron's hands trembled. "I tried to find you after. Searched archives, wrote letters, scrolled every social media for years. All this time, you've been here? Working this place? She shrugged, folding the towel in her hands. I couldn't get hired anywhere else. Too tough for security, too stubborn for the desk. And when they heard I led a platoon, well, that was the punchline. Waitress material, they said. He glanced around the diner. The other staff, barely more than teenagers, shuffled nervously. Not one of them carried themselves like this woman did. You're not a waitress, Linda. You're a legend. Linda gave a quick, hard smile. Try telling that to the guy who schedules the shifts. The noise of the diner returned in a trickle. Someone coughed, the register dinged, but everyone in earshot had gone still, watching the strange reunion play out. Some recognized Ron, the regular. Fewer recognized the look in Linda's eyes, the steady, haunted vigilance of someone who'd once been responsible for dozens of lives. Ron sat at the counter, suddenly feeling every year, every ache. They wrote you out of the story, he said, voice thick. She nodded. Sure, that's how it goes. In the time it took for Ron's eggs to arrive, the story started to leak from him, just as much for Linda as for himself. He talked about the VA meetings, the guys who still called him top, the dreams that never left. He let slip about the medal ceremonies, the heroes' breakfasts, the way people clapped for the uniform but never saw the scars beneath. Linda listened, pouring coffee, not missing a beat with the other customers. She never lost that soldier's discipline, making eye contact, reading the room, always knowing where every person in the place was. A real commander never lost the edge. People think it ends when you come home, she said, her voice pitched low, private. They don't see what follows you, not in the mirror, not in the resumes they never call back. Do they know what you did? Ron asked. What you gave up? Linda shook her head. Doesn't matter here. Here it's just coffee, orders, tips, maybe some kid who thinks I look like his aunt. But in the field, I kept every promise I could. Ron nodded, fighting emotion. The coffee mug felt heavy in his hand. You did. You kept us breathing. Even after I blacked out, I remember your voice. You telling me to hold on. Never knew if you made it. She looked away, and for the first time, he saw her blink back tears. I made it. They just didn't want me anymore. The kitchen bell rang, snapping the spell. Linda scooped up a tray, moving with a fluid efficiency that had nothing to do with breakfast and everything to do with battlefield triage. Ron watched her, saw the scar on her forearm, jagged, white, unmistakable. The same scar she'd earned shielding a wounded soldier from shrapnel. The same wound she'd never bothered to hide. That scar, he realized, was a badge more real than any medal. He stood and called out, "Hey, Storm, don't let this place take you down." She glanced back, eyes flashing with gratitude and pain. Wasn't the bullets that did it, she said. It was the paperwork. Outside, the day got brighter. But for Ron Mason, nothing would ever look the same again. The ghost from his past had a name, a face, a scar, and a tray full of dirty plates. But she also had something the Army could never take away, the respect of those she led. And now maybe, the beginning of a story the world needed to hear. Some reunions are so unlikely you could swear fate itself clocked in for the morning shift. The waitress with a scar, and the sergeant who carried her order in his skin, back in the same room. Neither of them in uniform, but both still wearing the war. The afternoon crowd at Sunrise Diner came in slow waves. Late lunchers, a family with sticky fingers, a couple of construction workers in neon vests. Linda moved among them with effortless command, tray balanced, pencil flying over the order pad. but her eyes kept flicking to the corner booth, where Ron sat with his empty mug, lost in thought. A younger waitress, Katie, 19, anxious, working for rent, fumbled an order at the register. Linda caught it in stride, fixed it with a word and a reassuring squeeze on the girl's shoulder. Ron watched the exchange, a little smile tugging at his lips. Even here, Linda couldn't help but lead. She steadied the green, caught the drops before they became floods. A platoon in aprons and sneakers. It wasn't until a lull fell, quiet but for the hum of the fridge, that Linda came to refill his coffee. She set the pot down and leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes steady. "I never expected to see anyone from over there," she said. "Least of all you." Ron gave a tired grin. "I could say the same, ma'am. For years, you were just a story, the one who wouldn't leave her people. Got a letter about you once. Rumor mill said you got a medal by mail and the boot in person." Linda scoffed, shaking her head. "That's about the size of it. They handed me a box, a ribbon, and a packet, telling me how grateful they were. Then, next morning, a letter from HR. My discharge paperwork. Insubordination, refused order to retreat, remained with wounded under fire. No pension, no appeals, no chance." Ron's hand balled to a fist on the table. "You did what every leader should. I wouldn't be here otherwise. We all owed you." Linda's gaze softened. "Owe me?" she echoed. "I'm pouring coffee, Ron. That's all anyone sees now." He shook his head, voice gentle but fierce. "You kept 20 men alive. You carried me 300 yards under shelling. Nobody here could do that." A silence settled between them, heavy with all the things unsaid. Outside, a delivery truck beeped in reverse. Inside, the kitchen window slid open and shut, but for a moment, there was no diner. Just the memory of gunfire and sand and orders barked across radio static. Linda picked up her badge, studied it. "I used to have a call sign, used to have respect. Now I've got a name tag and a rent bill." She slid the badge across the counter, a tiny defiance. "Funny, huh? All those medals, all that service, and here I am, hustling tips." Ron sat forward, elbows on the formica. "What about your family?" he asked quietly. "Did they help?" A flicker of pain passed across her face. "No family left. Parents gone, sister up north. We barely talk. Army was my family. But family doesn't always stick around when you're discharged for bad attitude." He nodded, knowing the story too well. "I get it. Since my wife passed, the meetings are all I got. The VA, the old crowd, most of them ghosts now. The rest drink, or just drift." Linda glanced at the teenagers behind the counter, laughing over TikToks and spilled sodas. "You ever think about telling someone? Telling the world what they did?" He chuckled, hollow. "Who would listen? People want heroes in parades, not the ones who get tossed out with the coffee grounds." She smiled, weary but wry. "Sometimes I think about writing it all down, but then I remember. What's the point?" He leaned in. "You're wrong. You're still a leader, Linda. Even here. I see how you run this place, how you hold it together. Doesn't matter if it's a squad or a kitchen, you still carry the weight." She studied him for a long, silent moment. Something in his words chipped at her armor. That's when the manager, Phil, mid-50s, tired tie, eyes always on the bottom line, strode in. "Linda, you've got a call on line 2. Says it's the VA?" Linda's breath caught. "Me? What for?" No idea. Says it's urgent. Ron watched her walk to the phone. She straightened her apron, tucked a curl behind her ear. Automatic, soldierly. He knew the walk. He'd seen it before the big operations. She'd brace her shoulders, take a breath, then stride into chaos with nothing but willpower and faith. She picked up the phone, voice low. Hello? Yes, this is Linda Johnson. The color drained from her face. She shot Ron a look, part dread, part hope. On the other end, a voice said, Ma'am, this is Sergeant Adams, VA Outreach. We saw a post online about Storm from Kandahar. We need to confirm some details about your service. There's quite a bit of interest. She hung up, shaken. Ron, did you write something about me? He grinned, sheepish. Put up a post last night, just a photo of my tattoo and a few words. Didn't think anyone would notice. Linda looked at him, eyes wide. What did you say? He pulled out his phone, scrolled, handed it over. It was a grainy picture. His scalp, the tattoo. Storm held the sky. Underneath, his caption. She kept us alive in Kandahar. They called her Storm. We thought she was dead. Turns out she's alive and working the morning shift at Sunrise Diner. America forgets its heroes, but I won't. Linda's hand shook. She scrolled down. Hundreds, thousands of likes, comments from former soldiers, even strangers. People asking for her story, people sharing their own. Soldiers, Storm got us through hell. Civilians, how do we help? Even local news. One message, direct, urgent, read, This is Senator Carter's office. We'd like to talk. She blinked, speechless. Ron's voice was soft. You're not invisible anymore, Major. A tear slid down her cheek. She brushed it away with the back of her hand. I don't know what to say. He squeezed her hand, gentle. You don't have to say anything. Just let them see you. The real you. At the counter, Katie gawked at her phone. Linda, there's a news van outside. And, is that Channel 4? Linda let out a shaky laugh. Well, Ron, looks like breakfast just got interesting. She squared her shoulders, wiped her hands on her apron, and marched toward the door. No longer just a waitress, but the commander she'd always been. And as she stepped outside to face the cameras, her head high and her eyes shining, Ron followed, knowing that for the first time in a long while, neither of them was walking into battle alone. Heroes aren't made in battlefields. They're revealed in the aftermath, in the quiet, in the dust, in the faces of those who refuse to let sacrifice be forgotten. On this day, America's memory walked back into the diner, and everything changed. The news vans jammed the parking lot before noon. Reporters with wind-mussed hair and over-caffeinated cameramen jockeyed for position outside Sunrise Diner, their microphones waving like sunflowers in a storm. Customers snapped photos. Linda felt her hands tremble as she looked out the window. For years, she'd kept her story packed tight inside her. Now, suddenly, the whole world wanted to hear it. She caught her reflection in the napkin dispenser. Apron, coffee stains, faded scar. Then she remembered what Ron had said. You're not invisible anymore. And she squared her shoulders, the way she had back in Kandahar, and stepped out the door. Ron was beside her, jacket zipped, face solemn. He was the one who had started all this, and he'd stand with her to the end. A TV anchor thrust a microphone at her. Linda, can you confirm, are you really Storm from the Kandahar unit? Linda blinked in the sunlight. She looked at Ron. He nodded, proud, and certain. She cleared her throat. Yeah, they called me Storm. My real name is Linda Johnson. I was a major in the Army. But you all already know the story you want. You want to talk about medals, firefights, all that, but that's not the whole truth. A hush fell. Even the fry cook came out and leaned against the door, listening. I got a medal in the mail, Linda said, but I also got a letter telling me not to come back. Because I refused to abandon my wounded. Because I did the job I was trained for. They called it insubordination. The words hung in the air, carried by a wind that suddenly felt like hope. The next days blurred. Phone calls from reporters, invitations to speak, social media exploding with support. But not all attention was welcome. The diner's manager, Phil, called her into the back office, face tight with nerves. "You're good for business, Linda," he said. "But you're causing too much of a scene. We just want peace. You can finish out the week, but after that, maybe it's time to move on." For a moment, her heart plummeted, but as she stepped back into the dining room, Ron was already waiting. He unzipped his jacket, showed the crowd his tattoo again, raised his voice so the whole diner could hear. "You fire her, you lose more than a waitress. You lose a hero." The phones came out. People recorded, posted. By dinner time, there were over 500,000 signatures on a petition. Keep Linda, honor her service. Within a week, the governor's office called, then a senator. The pressure was on. The Army quietly reopened her file. Someone at the Pentagon regretted the paperwork errors. Her service was under review. But the biggest moment came at the state capitol, when Linda, wearing her one good suit, stood before the Veterans Affairs Committee. Her hands sweated, but her voice was clear. "I don't want a parade. I don't want another medal. I want you to remember the people who serve and then get left behind. I want you to remember the ones you never see, because we're everywhere. Serving coffee, pushing shopping carts, driving cabs, waiting for someone to care." The silence that followed was electric. Then the applause began. Slow at first, then a wave rising to its feet. Reporters jostled for position, snapping photos as Ron, standing in the front row, wiped a tear from his eye. When she left the Capitol building, she was mobbed by veterans, old and young, men and women, black and white, every shade and rank. Some she'd led in Afghanistan, some she'd never met, but who saw in her a piece of themselves. One young woman hugged her, whispering, "You gave me courage to tell my story." A grizzled man in a wheelchair saluted. "You brought us home, Storm. Now you're bringing us all home." Months later, Linda stood in front of a packed audience at a National Veterans Summit. She'd traded her apron for a sharp blazer, but she still wore the scar on her arm, uncovered, as a badge of honor. Ron was at her side, beaming with pride. And when she finished her speech, the applause thundered again, because finally, she wasn't a forgotten soldier, or a fired waitress, or a rumor whispered in a diner. She was seen. As Ron hugged her, he whispered, "You held the sky, Major. Now you're holding us all up." Linda smiled, a real smile, the kind that comes from knowing you have finally come home.